Siri Carney, actually.
Okay. I was happy. I was expecting, apologies, I was expecting you to go first. I very much welcome this bill, I have to say, Minister, and I commend the Labour Party and in particular Senator Moynihan, who I know has been passionate on this particular subject. There is no question but that there has been a tremendous shortage of student accommodation. I mean, none of us have been untouched by parents contacting us, and I think, you know, particularly in the Shannon, maybe we get a lot from all over the country, so we get a good flavour of the demands and the needs in the city. I also commend that the original vision of responding to the accommodation crisis, the foreseeable accommodation crisis on student accommodation, but that also having a view of Dublin being a student, you know, where students live, and the energy that would have brought to the city. I commend that also. I think that would be, that is a great vision for the city. So it was right that we set up we set up a system whereby to induce the building of student accommodation in the city centre. I had a problem with where it was going. I had a problem with it, you know, in that constituency of Dublin South Central. There was a particular over-concentration of student accommodation at a time when there was, and continues to be, a huge demand for residential accommodation in that area for the local community and others wishing to live in the area. So there seemed to be a disproportionate building of student accommodation in the area. So in that regard, at times I would challenge how On Board Penola have permitted, how their planning process didn't seem to give any due regard to the development plan. And I welcome recent legislative we've come through PLS in the Housing Committee that I think will address and arrest that non-adherence to the development plan and to the view of the City Council. So I think from that point of view that we were moving in the right direction. A number of years ago, a long number of years ago, at this stage it's 2001, I was involved in building social housing or supported social accommodation in Dublin city centre. And in that, as an organisation taking a major leap of faith in the provision of the supported sheltered housing, we had that fallback plan. Worst case scenario, we could convert it into a hotel. And it was all individual, self-contained units of accommodation, all studio apartments, with a view for young people coming out of homelessness. But in that was our fallback. Worst case scenario, if this all went pear-shaped, and it didn't, because it was a major step of faith. It never came to pass. It never needed to. That particular facility is run by the DePaul very successfally in housing people. So it was never, but it certainly was a cushion to have the possibility of change of use as that girder that underpinned our step of faith out into something that was really big. But we were setting up a housing association, we were changing a charity, we were not people of huge means, we were relying on a lot of government funding, and even in that context we knew that if we ever needed to change use, we would have the difficulty that there would be a major clawback of the funding and a major clawback of the supports that we got had we ever done that, had we ever gone down that commercial route. So I suppose it strikes me as peculiar, and what I welcome in the concept at the core of this bill is that we set up a bespoke system to encourage investment into student accommodation because it's really needed. We set up a system to do that, and we have. I mean, what Senator Moynihan cited as, you know, the idea of there has been a reduction in the international students. Yes, that's true, but actually at the same time we have a major outcry for accommodation from domestic students. So there is this disparity and this really unbelievable situation being put forward by developers, while at the same time the cost of their accommodation is so prohibitively expensive that most families it's out of the reach of families for their students. So do I agree that they should be blocked from being able to change it? Yes, I do. But do I understand also that there needs to be some sort of a mechanism for a cushion when we do bring accommodation? So then this is where maybe I come back, and I know every time you're here and I'm standing here speaking, I always reference the housing needs and demands assessment, but there is a need for metrics to decide, and the metrics can come through the colleges, can be supported by, there is a means of gathering the metrics of student accommodation needs, and also that we examine through the colleges and through some sort of a survey within the colleges of, should there be a change of students in other countries get the opportunity to move out of home at earlier ages? Should we be supporting that? Should we be looking? Should we have some sort of a task force with Minister Harris's department that looks strategically on how do we support, is Susie enough? And I know he's bringing forward a review, but that these are all things that we need to address within that. But it isn't okay for a developer to benefit from an accelerated planning process, from tax benefits, from all of the associated inducements to get them to build, and that they suddenly, within a year or two or less, and in some instances without anyone ever occupying one of the rooms, that they get to turn around and change the use. That isn't okay. So I think that we need to arrest that rather aggressively, and I understand that the government is not opposing this bill, but we do need to arrest that. And I also understand that there is a retrospective provision within the bill that it just won't work in law. So I do understand that. I looked up the ads today. There's huge availability. So here we have students crying out for accommodation, affordable accommodation, and yet we have this huge availability because it's overpriced and because it's too expensive. And one would wonder, has it been pitched at that so as to oblige a situation for change of use? And we need to stand against that. So thank you.
Margaret, any